Hello and welcome once again to CanonBlogger.com, your online resource for everything from Photoshop video, tips and tricks, to camera articles with thoughts, concepts, and ideas relating to photography. Thanks for tuning in, and now for today's video podcast tip. Hello and welcome once again to CanonBlogger.com. This week's tutorial I'm going to very quickly go over the procedure that you can use to reposition or recrop an image if you compose it inside camera where the dimensions didn't work out for presenting something in a standard size picture frame. Standard picture frame sizes start at 4x6, they go up to 5x7, then 8x10, and 11x14. Well, because of your center size, it's not always going to be exactly right that, and you have to keep that in mind when taking pictures, or you'll end up in a situation like this where you have to fake it a little bit inside of Photoshop. And even though there is a way to fake it inside of Photoshop, it always is preferable to get it right in camera rather than have to fake it. But because we're all guilty of not getting it right in camera, there is a way where you can fix things in Photoshop. Here's a method that I picked up using the Marquee selection tool. So what you want to do is you want to take your image. I've got an image here of two balls, and I want to print it out as an 8x10, but the problem is when I go to crop that down to 8x10, when it snaps to the edge of the frame, I'm missing part of the bowl. Well, I can fix that in this image because I happen to notice that this wall here is a nice neutral, and it's kind of an easy thing to blend because it's part of the background. So what I can do is I'm going to take this crop selection, and I'm going to scooch it up a little bit. I'm going to take it up to about there because that looks like that's a good 8x10 size. And then I'm going to go ahead and commit that, and when I do that, it's going to take it up to 100%. So let me scroll this down a little so you can see everything again. So now I've got this white part behind here. Now what you want to do to fill that white part in, if you're using this technique, is you want to take the Marquee tool, which is M on your keyboard. Then you want to take a selection from down here on your photo, and you want to draw a line down. Looks like I got a little bit of the white there. So what I'm going to do is once that's selected, I'm going to scoot it down just a hair, something about like that. And then with the Marquee selection made, you want to go ahead and select Command or Control J on your keyboard to push that up to a new layer. Now that it's up on its own layer, and you can see it over here on the right hand side as layer 1, go ahead and select V for the move tool, and now you can move this selection up until it snaps into place, and you notice that the top white part is filled. Now in this case there is a little bit more cleanup work that has to be done because you'll notice you've got some repeating patterns, and you don't want to have repeating patterns. You want things to blend nicely and evenly and smoothly. So what you can do at this point is then with your layer 1 active, you want to switch over to the clone stamp tool, the clone stamp tool, which is the letter S on your keyboard for clone stamp. For stamp, actually I should say. And then using the Option or Alt key, you want to go ahead and make an original selection point, and you're going to be copying that up to your new layer. And here's the thing, you want to make sure that you have checked up here Sample All Layers, because you want to be pulling stuff from the original background. So I'm going to be selecting from here, I'm going to be pasting up here, I'm going to fill that in, and now it looks like it's looking a little more like it's blended nicely and naturally. Here's another key point on the options bar. I've got the opacity dropped down from 100% down to somewhere between 40 and 50. You don't want to do it a complete stamp because then it won't have as natural of a flow or smoothness to it. And then you can just keep on going and fill things out by doing random clone stamps across that line to kind of make it disappear. And you'll notice that I am doing repeated stamps just randomly around here until everything starts flowing evenly and it's not obvious that I did that little Marquee selection and moving it up to its own layer. And I'm just trying to avoid repeating patterns. So I'm just making different crops or different clone stamp selections to kind of avoid that duplicating evidence that is indicative of some really bad Photoshop techniques. And we're starting to look a lot better here. There is a little bit of cleanup work that needs to be done here. You can see this is repeating right there. Rather than go through the complete process, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to clean this up the quick and dirty method. I'm just going to put the crosshairs over that little black section. I'm going to clone stamp that. Then I'm going to scoot this up and I'm going to make that part black. So I'm just going to stamp and click, and you notice the effect that's starting to have. So I'm going to reduce my brush size, and I'm going to do the same thing again by stamping there and moving it up and keeping that clone stamp selection there, and that keeps the line straight if you use those crosshairs. That's actually a very valuable technique, especially if you need to keep some straight edges straight and you don't want to reveal that you've been doing some Photoshop adjustments. At that point, this is a really rough job here, so please don't use this as a critical analysis of the quality of the clone stamp tool or anything like that. This is just a rough edges tutorial to kind of give you the idea of how the process is performed. You obviously would want to clean it up a lot more than this. When you do get things done, satisfied, at that point you could flatten your image down to one layer so that you can save it as a JPEG and then output it to web or to a print or whatever at that 8:10 aspect ratio. That is more common in framing prints, and it's a fairly decent picture at this point. I wouldn't say it's an Ansel Adams or anything like that, but it does have some appeal to it that people may enjoy. So that's the technique or tip for this week. I would encourage you to comment on the blog. Feel free to email me as well if you have ideas for future tips, tricks, suggestions, or other tutorials. Do stop over to the blog even if you don't have tips or suggestions, because there's something rather important going on there this week. I mentioned on the blog, I'll go ahead and bring it up here right now, the Orphan Works Act, and I discovered this when I was reading the NAT forms. This is a piece of congressional legislation that can really be damaging to the creative works of artists, whether they're photographic artists or any kind of creative artist, because if an artist isn't associated with something, then people can take advantage of it and use it in their own endeavors and not give credit where credit is due. And they're not really defining what an orphaned work is in this legislation as it currently stands. So I encourage you to stop over to the blog, visit this link. All you need is your zip code and an email address, and you can let our politicians know that you do not want this legislation to be passed as it is. It's a great resource. It's a great way to finally speak out with a united voice. Thank you also to the Graphic Artists Guild. I understand they are the organization, the national organization that put this website together to give you the ability to email your congressman directly from just a zip code and an email address, and that way you can let your voice be heard. Since this is an election year, we do have a chance of actually being heard and having people act on our behalf and in our best interests. So anyway, that's it for this week. Stop by the blog, go look at the Orphan Works Act, thanks to the Graphic Artists Guild, and if anyone does have tips, tricks, suggestions, or ideas for future tutorials, please feel free to stop into the comments or send me an email. The address, as always, is jason@canonblogger.com. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.